the municipal broadcasting station of the City of New York, WNYC. We are again at the Board of Education building on Livingston Street, Brooklyn, to present another of the extremely interesting programs arranged by Mr. Rexford, Director of Civics. We again present Mr. Rexford to the microphone. Good evening, Mr. Rexford.
Good evening, Tommy. Mr. Cowan, excuse me. This is the fourth of our broadcasts on education. We have given lessons on reading, on arithmetic, and tonight we start with something new. We're going to give you something on geography, so get out your maps on Africa. After this Glee Club, which is waiting now already to sing to you, has given a selection, we shall give that lesson on geography. The leader of this Glee Club is Miss Helen M. Frisco, and these boys and girls are from the Pershing Junior High School, number 220 in Brooklyn. Already, we will now render America the Beautiful by Ward. Beautiful in the singing of children. I think it's Bret Hart said he never was afraid to go in where he heard people singing. I'm sure these boys and girls would invite Bret Hart in if he were here. Now we're all ready for this talk on geography. It's going to be given by Mr. Augustus Ludwig, the principal of Pershing Junior High School, number 220 in Brooklyn. Mr. Ludwig.
Good evening, everybody. I had an opportunity recently of examining a geography textbook in use in the public schools some 40 years ago. There were very few pictures. Most of the text consisted of definitions of a bay, gulf, island, peninsula, cape, mountain, plain, plateau. Then there were long lists of states, countries, capitals, chief cities, seaports. All these facts were listed so that the pupil could memorize them. If the pupil gave the facts exactly as he found them in the text, he was given a perfect mark for a perfect recitation. If he deviated from the printed definition, he failed. The work in geography consisted of words and words to be memorized. If you should visit a class in geography in our public school today, you would be astounded at the change that has taken place. The earth as the home of man. This involves, first, a knowledge of the physical facts. Second, a knowledge of human activities. Third, a knowledge of the interrelationships between these activities and the physical facts. 5 general aims are constantly kept in mind in teaching geography. First, the practical aim. Everyone should be able to locate certain places and physical features, to interpret simple maps, to understand those geographical facts, human activities, and their interrelation, which are met with in conversation and in general reading. He should also know how to obtain additional information if he desires it. Second, the cultural aim. Beyond the body of knowledge, habits, and attitudes which is immediately useful, there is another group, the possession of which marks a person as cultured and makes it possible for him to react more successfully to his environment. With this richer background, he becomes a more intelligent reader of newspapers and periodicals. He has a better understanding of the interdependence of man and his environment. He has a greater ability to study independently, and he has a better basis for his opinions. As many of the facts of geography are continually changing, the cultured person should have a permanent interest in the subject, which will cause him to seek out the new facts. Third, the moral aim. This aim is not entirely distinct from the other two aims. It is mentioned separately, however, to bring out the value that geography has in arousing in pupils a love for their own country, an understanding of the mutual dependence and helpfulness of different groups of people, which will lead to sympathy and respect for the peoples of other lands, an understanding and appreciation of the great laws, forces, and resources which vitally affect the lives of people, and of the efforts which the inhabitants of the earth have made to utilize them for human betterment and to overcome the obstacles and difficulties presented by their environment. A student of American institutions said, "The Valley of the Mississippi is, upon the whole, the most magnificent dwelling place prepared by God for man's abode." Another writer, speaking of this statement, said, "Without disputing the verdict, we may safely extend it to the whole territory of the United States. For, while the Valley of the Fathers of Waters, which forms the heart of America, is incomparably the most splendidly adapted for human development of all the great river valleys of the world, the regions which surround it, with their more varied climate and scenery and their wealth of natural resources, add that variety of conditions, of stimulus, and of opportunity which perhaps are essential to a many-sided national life of the richest and most perfect kind. In no subject is there a better opportunity to show the progress of man, physically, commercially, economically, morally. The conservation of resources, the dignity of labor, the exploration of unknown parts of the earth and the depths of the seas, the improvement of commerce by land, water, and air, the circulation of moisture, irrigation, the interdependence of people, the influence of oceans, winds, forests, mountains, and rivers, as well as other topics, should be taught not as groups of facts to be memorized, but as organized topics which will exert decided influence on ideals and conduct. Imagination. Geography deals with places and people which have not been seen or visited by pupils. See, memory. If the facts are related to one another, the subject becomes extremely interesting, and the facts are remembered easily and reproduced without difficulty. D, reasoning. The subject matter affords many opportunities for presenting problems to the pupils which require thought for their solution. Fifth, finally, the recreational aim. Schools should do more to provide means for spending leisure time profitably. The study of geography should arouse an interest in the outdoor world, in the beauties of nature, and in travel, lectures, books, or other means of enjoying the world about us. In teaching geography today, visual aids are made use of constantly. These are classified as, first, actual objects and models; two, pictures; third, lantern slides; fourth, stereographs; fifth, motion pictures; sixth, maps, charts, and graphs. The class excursion is an excellent vehicle of instruction in geography. Accompanied by the teacher, the class visits the waterfront to study shipping, to see at first hand what is being exported and what is being imported. Where did the products come from, and where are they going? The study of maps is also made most fascinating. Supplementing all these activities are visits to museums and to special illustrated lectures. Geography, then, is in reality a most interesting study of the earth on which we live as the home of man.
Thank you, Mr. Ludwig. We ought to be in pretty good shape to listen to that geography lesson on Africa very soon. But before that happens, we're going to ask the Glee Club to sing Dream of Paradise by Gray. We're now in the Glee Club. Wasn't that fine? Now, these boys and girls are going to be quiet for a few minutes while we have this very serious lesson on geography. This lesson will be on Africa. Now, you'd like to know who the actors are. Well, here is Lillian Berger, Rosalind Swerdlick, Shirley Burskin, Gertrude Bernstein, Arthur Jaffa, and Lawrence Scheller. Now, they all look as though they're ready. The lesson will be taught by Miss Dickinson, Miss Louise M. Dickinson of this same school. Miss Dickinson?
In presenting this lesson, I will try to conduct it exactly as I would in my classroom. Would you please imagine that I have a class seated in front of me with geography textbooks on their desks. On the wall is a map of Africa. This is our first study of the continent. Boys and girls, our object today is to get acquainted with the far-off continent, Africa. I asked you yesterday to read the first chapter in your geography books, so you know something about the continent we are to talk about. For many years, this continent was called the Dark Continent. Africa has been the last of the continents to be developed by white men. Let us see if we can discover some reasons for this. Stephen, unroll the large wall map. All of you will now turn to the political map on page 30, the regional map on page 17, and your rainfall map on page 13. Compare these maps and see if you can tell me why Africa was so difficult to explore and settle. Rosalind.
Africa has very few harbors, so it is difficult to enter.
Shirley?
Explorers generally sail up the river to the interior, and in Africa there are many falls and rapids near the mouths of the rivers, so they would not be navigable.
Lawrence?
There are many swamps, and they would have been hard to cross, and they must have been very unhealthful.
Well, Gertrude?
There seems to be dense jungles in which would be found many wild beasts and poisonous snakes. These would make traveling dangerous.
Lillian?
The Sahara Desert was difficult to cross on account of the sand and the heat. Besides this, there were fierce Arabs who roamed over the desert and attacked all travelers.
Arthur?
On the desert, there was very little rainfall.
Rosalind?
In Central Africa, it is very hot, and there must have been mosquitoes and other insects which would carry disease.
Aaron?
There were wild savages in the jungles.
All these are excellent reasons why Africa remained unknown for so long. There were two explorers who awakened great interest in Africa in the 19th century. Perhaps you have heard of these men. One was, Sarah?
David Livingstone.
Yes, and who was the other? Leonard, I see your hand is raised.
Henry M. Stanley.
Good. And today, most of Africa is ruled by European nations. Study your map and notice the variety of colors. These colors indicate the countries owning territory. Lucy, name 6 of these countries.
France, England, Portugal, Spain, and Italy.
One more. You may tell me, Grace.
Belgium. Miss Dickinson, this country must have been explored by Livingstone and Stanley.
You are quite correct. What is your reason for saying that?
Because I see on the map Stanley Falls, Stanley Pool, Livingstone Lake, and Livingstonia.
Well, Sadie?
They needed new markets for their manufactured goods.
What country in Europe which had previously owned territory lost it all during the World War? Do you know, John?
Germany.
And there was another war when the Dutch lost their possessions in southern Africa. Do you know what this war was? You may answer, Letty.
The Boer War between the Dutch and English.
Yes. After this war, the English took possession of the gold mines in southern Africa. This is the most productive gold region in the world. The gold is exported to England for coining. Lillian spoke of the hot climate of Africa. What makes climate vary? What's your idea, Geraldine?
The distance away from the equator affects climate.
William?
Altitude is the height above sea level.
Good. Rosalind?
Winds affect climate.
Shirley has another idea.
Rain difference in the climate of a place.
Let us look very carefully at the colors on our map. What European nation seems to own most of the territory in Africa, Arthur?
France.
Yes, but England owns more comfortable land. For as you notice, much of French territory is in desert regions. Let us see what circles cross Africa. Lillian.
Tropic of Cancer.
Gertrude?
Tropic of Capricorn and the equator.
Africa lies in 3 zones and has therefore a great variety of climates, products, industries, and people. Now compare your 3 maps very carefully and tell me something that these maps show you about the different regions of Africa. First, let us take the equatorial region. What do you think, Irving?
There is much rainfall. There are tropical forests, and the chief products seem to be rubber, ivory, and palm oil.
What do they tell you of the Mediterranean coast, Rose?
The climate is subtropical. There is little rainfall, and the chief products are grains and fruits, such as lemons and figs and oranges. I think the chief industry must be farming.
Let us look at our physical map again. In what country do we find the highest land of Africa? Leonard?
Abyssinia. Another name for that is Ethiopia, isn't it?
Yes. Lucy seems to have something to say.
That is the country where they just celebrated the anniversary of the crowning of the new emperor, isn't it? I saw many pictures of it in the newspaper.
Quite true. What have you found, Grace?
The Nile River rises in Abyssinia, I think.
Yes? And through what country does the Nile River flow?
It flows through Egypt and empties into the Mediterranean Sea.
Yes? It flows almost directly north. Tell me something about the Nile River, Alex.
It flows through Egypt. It overflows its banks, and so makes the land fertile.
What have you to say, Rita?
Along its banks are the tombs of ancient kings, pyramids, obelisks, temples, and the Sphinx. What is the Sphinx?
Who can answer Sarah's question? Arthur?
I know. It is a huge stone statue with the body of a lion and the head of a woman. The sand of the desert covers the paws of the lion, and every so often men have to dig away the sand. I read about it in the Book of Knowledge, and there is a good picture on page 325 in our geography book.
I see a hand over there.
What is a tomb?
Well, Lauren?
Tombs are places where people bury their dead. Along the Nile River, miles of tombs were cut out of the solid rock. The ancient Egyptians placed the bodies of their dead. I have some pictures of the tomb of King Tutankhamun, which was discovered in 1924. People call him King Tut because his name is so hard to pronounce.
The climate in Egypt is hot in summer, warm and dry in winter. The land is fertile, but they must have water. How will they get the water? Geraldine, what do you think?
By irrigation or artificial watering.
Yes, there are large dams, and from these dams, many canals branch out and distribute the water where it is needed. There's an excellent map of the Aswan Dam on page 43. We've talked a good deal about the Nile, the longest river in Africa. There's another large river. This one is in the tropical region. Well, William?
I see it. It is the Congo River.
Yes, it is the Congo River, the largest river in Africa. The Nile is the longest, but the Congo is the largest. By largest, I mean it contains the greatest amount of water. The Congo is second only to the Amazon in the whole world. This river also has falls and rapids, but above the falls, the river is navigable for small steamers. We've said very little about the people of Africa. Tell me what race we would expect to find in the equatorial region and give a reason for your answer. Rita.
The Negro race, because they can stand the very hot climate.
And in the desert region, whom would we find? And why, Sarah?
Arabs, because they live a wandering life and travel from place to place in search of pasturage for their cattle.
And whom would you look for in the northern and southern parts of Africa, Leonard?
The white race, or Caucasians, because the Europeans live in these sections, the English on most of southern Africa, the French, Italians, English, and Spanish settled in northern Africa. There will be some Negroes in these sections also, especially southern Africa, because the Negroes do the hard labor in the gold mines.
Let us think carefully and see if we can find some things which would stand in the way of the industrial progress in Africa. Well, Lucy?
Most of Africa is hot and dry, so I think the people would not be ambitious or industrious.
Gertrude?
There are few navigable rivers. This would prevent exploration and settlement.
Yes, Irving?
There are few good harbors, so there would not be much trade with other countries.
Well, Rosalind?
There are not many railroads or other ways of transporting goods.
With what European countries do you think much of Africa's trade would be carried on, Shirley?
France and England, as these two countries own most of the land in Africa. Miss Dickinson, I think that the Suez Canal must have helped trade.
Yes, the canal was a great piece of engineering. The French engineer de Lesseps was in charge of the work, which was completed in 1869. England has the controlling interest in the canal. Now let's have a brief summary of points covered in our lesson. I'll put a few topics on the blackboard which will help you to recall points learned. Will you quickly recite as I point to you?
Africa was difficult to explore because there are few harbors, the rivers have many falls and rapids, there are many swamps, dense jungles are in the interior, many wild beasts and poisonous snakes are in the forest. The deserts are hot and rainless, and fierce Arabs frequented them. The heat is intense. Poisonous insects are to be found. Wild savages roam the land.
Two explorers of the 19th century were Livingstone and Stanley.
European nations owning territory in Africa are England, France, Portugal, Spain, Belgium, and Italy. These nations wanted territory because they needed new land, they needed raw materials, and they needed new markets for their manufactured goods.
Africa has a large variety of climates, products, industries, and people.
Climate varies because of latitude, altitude, rainfall, and wind. The longest river is the Nile. The largest river is the Congo. The highest land is in Abyssinia.
In Egypt are to be found tombs, pyramids, obelisks, and the Sphinx.
Two great pieces of engineering which help trade are the Suez Canal and the Cape to Cairo Railroad.
Caucasians live in northern and southern Africa. Negroes are natives of Central Africa.
Tomorrow we will talk more at length about the industries and products of Africa. I should like you to be able to tell me what steamship lines connect the African ports with New York. Tell me what products you think of.